Hello, everybody, and welcome to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon, a jam-packed show. As NBA draft time closes in, that means the free agency season will be here as well. We'll bring in Chris Fedor, the Cavs beat reporter from cleveland.com. We'll also talk a little bit about Browns football as different players are having camps across the areas. Jarvis Landry's charity softball tournament will be over at Captain's Park this weekend as well. We're going to talk a little bit about Browns' training camp. We'll get started in just about 5 or 6 weeks, and then the season will be upon us before you know it. Whenever we talk Browns, we bring in Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report, also a contributor here on cleveland.com. Jake, appreciate the time. Let's take a look at what Baker Mayfield can do for Odell Beckham Jr., a guy that can get deep, can make some outstanding catches. Really hasn't played with a guy that throws the deep ball as well as Baker Mayfield does, really in his career.
Yeah, so it's ironic. You look at what makes Odell Beckham one of the best players in the NFL. It's the popularity he has on those wild catches, those acrobatic one-handed plays that he's become known for. He seems to have one or two of those every season. But Baker is going to be a little bit different. It should be a little bit different. Last year, I think Odell Beckham had the lowest percentage of footballs thrown in his direction that were on target or in stride, according to Pro Football Focus, and something near 50%. That'll actually be different. Baker Mayfield was in the top 5 of that actual statistic when he took over with Freddie Kitchens there weeks 9 through 17 when he started to really hit his stride. So I do think there's some really high hope that things will become easier for Odell Beckham in terms of where the football arrives for him. And he even made reference to that in his most recent when he actually met with the media there in minicamp, is that it's just an adjustment process. I think people in New York took his comment about the Baker Mayfield's arm just being different as a knock on Eli. That's not a knock on Eli. The guy's a Hall of Famer, but Baker does have a very live arm, and he has really well-known accuracy that translated back from his days at Oklahoma. So at the same time, even though it's adjustment for Odell, I think he'll find that his life will be a lot easier, and that instead of worrying about where the football will arrive when he leaves his break or creates that separation and turns for the football, it'll be less worrying about, is this ball going to be accurate, and more worrying about, get your head around, catch the football as it comes into a catchable area, and then what are you doing with the football after the catch? So those opportunities will help Odell. Those opportunities Odell creates through separation will obviously help Mayfield as well.
What about the dynamic of having a deep threat like an Odell Beckham? I know Browns had Callaway, but it should open up pretty much the entire offense underneath if you're running Callaway and Beckham out. That should be to your liking if you're an offensive player.
Absolutely. The Browns will, they're going to be 4 wide receivers deep of guys that they trust between the guy you mentioned there, Antonio Callaway, Jarvis Landry, and Rashard Higgins. And Odell will draw a ton of attention. It was on display at minicamp a couple times. He ran a shallow cross and or something like a deep over where he's working from one side of the field to the other, and you can just see eyes gravitate to him. It's just sort of that respect that he's earned. Guys always are going to cheat his way, whether they're in the first half or the second half of coverage. He did a fantastic job, obviously, carving that path for himself, and now the Browns offense will likely benefit from less over-the-top second help on guys like Callaway who can really burn down the field. And it'll allow Jarvis Landry to work underneath intermediate areas that he's known to do so well and feel like the Browns offense doesn't have to force him the ball down the field so often. So I think it'll benefit, obviously, everybody around Odell, but it'll benefit the comfort at which they put players in situations in this offense.
Well, there was a national story that came out that said within the past day or so that said the Browns offense was having trouble grasping, the players having trouble to grasp Todd Monken's offense. That was kind of a head scratcher for me, and I didn't see it at the mini camps that we went to. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I didn't notice any of that in terms of Todd Monken and Freddie Kitchens not being able to work together, or there were issues and strife and them working together. And I think it needs to be reminded that this is Freddie Kitchens' offense. The guy earned the job because of his offensive coordinator performance in weeks 9 through 17. And he was very vocal about obviously keeping that role, calling plays going into next season, because that is, like I said, what earned him that job. So I think Todd Monken is just here to sort of infuse his ideas, which is built within an air raid offense structure, sort of give ideas, give philosophies, work with Freddie's offense. It's going to take time to gel. You've been really in 2 team sessions and OTAs and minicamp, but don't think that this is a Todd Monken's taking over the offensive coordinator hire. I don't think that was ever the plan. I'm sure it wasn't communicated that way. And I don't think this is anything to really concern yourself about, because it's going to be a process between those two sort of getting on the same philosophical page, and then Monken learning what Freddie does, how he calls things, how that offense translates from last year to this year. So, that report to me rubbed me as this is not understanding what's going on in Cleveland in terms of how the structure is built. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Another thing that has kind of grabbed everybody's attention, the whole Duke Johnson situation, with Johnson saying that, in fact, he still wants to be traded, and kind of the backlash with what happened with Baker Mayfield. As you sort that out, what do you see with what went on in the whole Duke Johnson situation?
First off, it's just unfortunate. Like, it's unfortunate that a guy wants out. A guy got known that his name was being shopped, and it's just tough. You go to minicamp, and the first thing that Duke Johnson says to the media upon his arrival is that he wants to be traded, and there's zero way that they can rectify it. So after his interview there at minicamp, we get Baker Mayfield, and the question comes up to Baker Mayfield is, can you, what do you think from the team perspective? Is this going to be a distraction? Because Duke Johnson just made his trade request in person to the media, and Baker really, it felt like he wanted to keep things focused. It felt like he wanted to keep his team together on this whole front. So he used the word self-inflicted, which people have had a lot of problem with. To me, it felt less a knock on Duke and more of this is something that can only distract Duke and not the rest of the football team. So I know how it came off. And I think Mayfield is trying to put out that leadership that, hey, I know how to win. I brought wins here last year. My style of winning is going to change this place no matter how few amount of years I've been here. But I don't think he was trying to personally attack Duke. There's obviously no addressing the contract situation, which has come up, because that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about keeping his team focused. And I understand where Duke Johnson's coming from. B, I understand where Baker's coming from. And I also understand where the Browns are coming from, because obviously they did shop him, but they felt like the offers that they got in return were not of any value to what they believe the player is. So at the end of the day, Duke Johnson can be offended, which is fine. It's subjective feelings. I get it. But they didn't just give him away or cut him. They feel he has more value than what was offered. And Freddie Kitchens made it abundantly clear that they still have a role for him in this offense. Hopefully the two sides can work it out, because when they're on the field, it looked like the two sides were going to be working together just fine between Mayfield and Johnson and Freddie Kitchens. So, I wouldn't call this a lost cause at this point, but I certainly understand where everybody's coming from. And if Mayfield had that opportunity to meet with veterans and learn from this situation, as was reported, not sure that that's been confirmed by many other people, and Jarvis Landry was unwilling to really confirm it today at his camp, where he said non-issue. If that did happen, that's a good sign. You want your older players to bring in your younger players and get on the same page about how to handle those things. So overall, it can be a negative if you view it in a certain lens, but to me, it's a positive overall for everybody involved.
Yeah, without question. I mean, these things happen when teams are really good and really talented, like the Browns are expected to be. We're going to have Jake stick around. We're going to take a quick timeout. When we return, we're going to talk some defense. Steve Wilks defense straight ahead on More Sports and Less. Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
No other company or product can match the features, benefits, and warranty of an authentic Nature Stone floor.
My basement was a disaster. We tried carpet, we tried tile on our uneven basement floor, but nothing worked.
Moisture, dampness, even flooding will not harm Nature Stone. And with Russell's Promise, our true unconditional warranty, you will never have to replace your basement flooring again. Get Nature Stone installed by the end of June and save up to 50%. Schedule your free cost estimate easily online today at naturestone.com. It's not just a floor, wow, it's Nature Stone.
More sports and less. Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition continues. I'm Dave Bacon, and we will continue to talk Browns football as training camp gets underway in about 6.5 weeks or so, as the Browns will get set in late July to begin preparation for the 2019 season. Let's bring back in Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report, a contributor here on cleveland.com. And Jake, Demarius Randall, a guy that had an outstanding season last year in Greg Williams' defense, felt like he more fits in what's going to be asked of him to be done by Steve Wilks, and really would love an extension and would like to stay here. Seems to really like what has happened with the Browns and likes Cleveland, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I certainly think on that defense, which is built around a ton of leaders that don't have an outward vocal approach between Joe Schobert, Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, Sheldon Richardson, Larry Ogunjobi, even Denzel Ward. A lot of those guys aren't the vocal type that can, sort of be that out in front, talking to the opposition, doing those things that are required of a vocal leader. And I think he fills that role really well. Demaryius obviously loves Cleveland. If you follow his Twitter account or interview him, he's enjoyed his 2 years here now, going into year 2, and is also very excited about the different alignments that will come with Steve Wilks' defense. He'll be closer to the line of scrimmage on occasion. Will also still be playing that center field role. He had a really good year in last year. But don't forget, this guy arrived from Green Bay with cornerback experience, and when the Browns were in a pinch last year, started at corner against Tampa Bay and had a really nice game. So he can do a little bit of everything. As far as his contract goes, it does appear he obviously wants to re-sign with Cleveland, an extension. But the Browns have a plethora of big names to sort of look at re-signing at the end of this year and start to gauge, the Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Baker Mayfield contracts that aren't entirely too far off. So they have a lot of things to do, sort of a lot of things to look at. Joe Schobert's name will be mentioned. Ogunjobi's name will be mentioned. I think what they're going to do is evaluate things. They sort of put everything on pause right now because the safety market blew up. A lot of big contracts, Landon Collins, Earl Thomas, those sorts of things happened. And there was a lot of big contracts in that area. And Demaryius probably thought it was best, too, that they put everything on the back burner until the end of next season and sort of see what the player looks like. And Demaryius is betting on himself. He comes out, has a great year. He could see a really good payday. And the Browns, too, are trying to make sure that they're being sort of as thorough as possible when they look at who they're going to pay as a long-term part of this franchise. So they probably see it as beneficial as well to wait it out and then evaluate who they think are the young cornerstones moving into the future.
As you look at this defense, and we've talked about this a couple of times, it appears that Steve Wilks wants to play with 2 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. What's the advantage of that? What do you see this defense being? How do you see it taking shape?
Yeah, I think that they're going to have 2 linebackers on the field about 80% of the time. I think that what that allows them to do is use what they attacked in free agency, trade market draft, which is those hybrid defensive guys like Eric Murray, Morgan Burnett, Sheldrick Redwine. Those guys, obviously Demarius Randall is the thoroughbred there, but even Jermaine Whitehead, who they have been obviously, if you've listened to reports, been counted on heavily in minicamp and OTAs, they're going to use players in and out of that third linebacker spot, that hybrid role, a guy who can cover the slot, a guy who can blitz the quarterback, a guy who can be a force defender and run game. They made themselves very flexible in the defensive back position in terms of the inside corner and safety position, those guys that can move up and move back. And I think that that'll lend themselves to be able to play the run game better as the speed has increased across the league, but it will also allow them to match up with personnel better. And instead of putting a third linebacker on the field like the Browns did last year between Kirksey and Jamie Collins, they'll have a more athletic player who can play zone coverage, feel more comfortable, but can also match up with slot wide receivers and tight ends as teams deploy more and more guys out in routes in a passing league. So it's beneficial in both phases if used correctly, and you have to have the right personnel. And I think the Browns did attack that personnel issue with that position pretty thoroughly this year.
Jake Burns, contributor here on cleveland.com, as well as from the Orange and Brown Report. We appreciate the insight on the Cleveland Browns, as always. Time for us to step aside, take a quick timeout. When we return, Chris Fedor will join us to talk Cavs basketball. We're going to talk draft. We'll also talk about the upcoming free agency in the NBA. That's all straight ahead on the Weekend Winners Edition. Stay with us.
It takes attention to detail. With your local Bryant dealer, you're getting more than just a technician. You're getting someone who pays attention to your needs and the little things that make a big difference. It takes a dealer you can rely on. And to keep your family cool this summer,
let me show you how this works.
It takes Bryant.
Bryant, whatever it takes.
And to keep your family comfortable, it takes Smiley One Heating and Cooling. Find them at 440-449-HEAT.
Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. NBA draft next week on Thursday. Some big news as far as the NBA draft and free agency goes. When we talk NBA and Cavs, we bring in Chris Fedor, the beat writer for the Cavs here on cleveland.com. Chris, appreciate the time. Let's start out with the finals. Wrapped up last night. Kawhi Leonard gets the championship for the Toronto Raptors. Might be a one and done. What do you see happening? Let's start with Kawhi Leonard as far as free agency goes.
Dave, it's a one and done. That's a heck of a way to go out for somebody like Kawhi. Come into Toronto, change the fortunes of the franchise forever, rewrite the history of the franchise forever, get an entire country behind you, make basketball bigger than hockey for at least a couple of weeks in Canada. So it's a heck of a performance by Kawhi if he is indeed one and done. It's so hard to know, Dave, when it comes to these guys and free agency, because I think the common thought with Kawhi was that he was going to be one and done, and he was probably going to be Los Angeles bound, and most likely the Los Angeles Clippers. But so many things have changed in the NBA based on what happened in the NBA Finals. The Warriors are no longer the juggernaut that everybody thought they were going to be. The West is wide open suddenly. The East is going to be wide open because who knows what's going to happen with Boston. I still think Kawhi has a chance to go to Los Angeles and join the Clippers, but the Raptors have had a whole year because of this trade that they made, Dave, to convince Kawhi that Toronto is best, why he should believe in the franchise, right? Why he should believe in Kyle Lowry and his teammates and form that bond with all of his teammates. Maybe Kawhi says, I just want to be in Los Angeles. I want a different challenge, but boy, it would be hard to leave.
You alluded to this now. KD, Durant, he's done for at least a year with a Achilles. Last night, Klay Thompson tears an ACL. Both of those guys are free agents, not tied together by any means. Do you see them staying with Golden State, or do you see them moving potentially? What's the talk about that?
So the talk around the NBA is that Klay was going to be a Golden State lifer. He just loved the Bay Area. He didn't care about all that other stuff that some of these other prospective free agents probably did care about. So there were people around the NBA that said, write Klay Thompson in pen to the Golden State Warriors. KD, there was a lot of conversation around the NBA going back to even the beginning of this year, Dave, where it was KD's going to go to New York, and it's just who's going to go with him to New York. And New York meant it could have been the Knicks, it could have been the Brooklyn Nets, both of those teams possible. I don't know what this means in terms of KD and how he approaches it now. I don't think it changes anything, though, Dave, in terms of whether a team is going to max KD. I think any team in the NBA, despite the fact that he's going to miss probably the entire upcoming season, will offer him the max, be patient, and try and build the other pieces around him so that when he's ready to come back, that team is more ready for him. It's just, does KD feel like he's going to come back the same kind of player and bet on himself the way that he probably would have by leaving Golden State had he been completely healthy?
The other one that still seems to be up in the air, though signs are pointing to him leaving Boston, Kyrie Irving. What do you make of that? Changed agents to Rock Nation. What do you make of that, and where do you think Kyrie lands?
So I think when it comes to the Rock Nation thing, Dave, I think Kyrie has always been interested in other things beyond basketball, after basketball, and during basketball. He's a very different guy. He might be the most different guy that I've ever come across in my entire life. But look, he's in commercials. He's in movies. He cares about arts. And Rock Nation has a whole entertainment arm. And they have entertainment backing in a way that his agent simply does not. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I've been writing going back to November. There are people that are close to Kyrie as you can be. And there are people that feel like they know his thinking as much as you can know Kyrie's thinking on a daily basis, that have said, Chris, I'm telling you, do not exclude the Brooklyn Nets. And that's going back to November. They just think the Brooklyn Nets as an organization can speak to Kyrie on an intellectual level that is going to resonate with him. And on top of that, Dave, they're not a finished product, but they're not a bottom feeder. So they're kind of in that middle ground where if Kyrie goes to Brooklyn, he has a chance to lift that team to new heights. He grew up as a Nets fan. He grew up in that particular area. He's always been an East Coast guy as opposed to a West Coast guy. So I wouldn't rule out the Knicks, but everybody since November have been telling me, the people that know him well, do not rule out the Brooklyn Nets. That makes the most sense for Kyrie, while everybody else pegged him to the Knicks.
Let's shift our focus. Let's start talking a little bit about the Cavs. They hired an assistant coach and made some headlines. Lindsey Gottlieb was the head women's coach at Cal Berkeley. She becomes an assistant for John Beilein. What do you think of this? Certainly she has the credentials, without question, has been the National Coach of the Year and has led her team to the Final Four, has been the Pac-12 Coach of the Year. The coaching credentials are there. What do you make of this, Chris?
Whether the Cavs are right or wrong in this, Dave, and there are no guarantees that a rebuild is actually going to be successful. There are a lot of things that have to go right for this organization. There are some teams that go into this rebuild, Dave, and they're stuck in it for 5 to 10 years. The Cavs probably would still be rebuilding if LeBron James didn't come back to save them. But whether they're right or wrong, they believe in people, and they're going to bet on people. That's a big reason why they drafted Colin Sexton with the 8th overall pick, despite the questions about his playmaking, his vision, his outside shot. They were betting on the person, his work ethic, his character, his toughness, his leadership, all of those different things. And the Cavs, when they went into this coaching search, Dave, they didn't say, okay, we're going to get this particular person from this particular experience level or this connection to our organization. They said, we want a culture driver who is going to be great when it comes to developing young players, that is going to find a way to get the most out of these young players that we're trying to build this organization with. We want somebody who's going to build something that's been around winning and make this sustainable. So they didn't factor in age, they didn't factor in race, they didn't factor in gender. They just had certain criteria that they were looking for from a coach. And they went John Beilein, but the same goes true when it comes to Lindsey Gottlieb. She has been around winning programs before. She is really, really smart. She spent some time around the Golden State Warriors, watching their practice, picking the brain of Steve Kerr. She's really innovative. She's a forward thinker. She's not going to put her players in a box because that's the conventional way of doing things. And I just think the Cavs are being true to the things that they believe deep down are going to matter when it comes to building a franchise. I don't know that they're going to be right. I think the lack of experience for John Beilein and Lindsey Gottlieb may matter, but it also may be offset by the fact that J.B. Bickerstaff has been a head coach for 3 years in the NBA, and he brings the experience that those two lack. But they're betting big on people, and they believe that they're hiring the right people for this kind of thing, Dave, because a rebuild is not for everybody. It wasn't for Ty Lue. It wasn't for other coaches of the past. It could be for John Beilein and somebody like Lindsey Gottlieb.
Chris Fedor, the Cavs beat reporter for cleveland.com. We've got to take a quick time out. When we return, we'll talk mock draft. The draft is coming up Thursday. Chris Fedor's 2.0 mock draft when we return on More Sports. And Les Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Stay with us.
There are tastes we remember. Every smell brings the happiness of times gone by. Experience this every time you walk into Gallucci's Italian Foods. Whether you need lunch on the go, a catered party, or that perfect blend of wine, meats, and cheeses, Gallucci's has exactly what you're looking for. Straight from Mama's Kitchen for old world traditions or original experiences. From the tastes you remember to new flavors you'll never forget. Gallucci's is a tasty branch of your family tree.
Welcome back to More Sports and Les Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Thursday is the NBA Draft. The Cavs have the 5th overall pick. We're going to welcome back in Chris Fedor, the Cavs beat reporter here on cleveland.com. And Chris, I know you've done 2 mock drafts. First 3 are pretty standard as far as who's going to get drafted 1, 2, and 3 with Williamson, Morant, and rj-barrett going 1, 2, and 3. Then you like Darius-Garland from Vanderbilt going 4. You have the Cavs selecting DeAndre-Hunter from Virginia. What do you like about him? What do you think kind of sets him apart for the Cavs?
So I keep going back and forth on this one, Dave, but I think the thing that I like about him is very similar to what I was saying with betting on people. The Cavs believe strongly in the controllables. Like I said, the work ethic, the toughness, the attitude, the character. And DeAndre-Hunter, there are questions about his offensive game and whether he can go out and create his own shot, whether he's an alpha, whether he can be a star player versus just a rotational player. How high is his ceiling? Like, all of those are legitimate questions, and I get it. But this is somebody who makes his mark on the defensive end. He impacts winning. There's nobody that will say a bad thing about him. His work ethic can't be questioned. So all of those things, when you look at what matters most to the Cavs when trying to build this thing the right way, he checks basically all of their boxes. Again, I don't know that he's got as much potential as somebody like Cam Reddish, maybe even Jarrett-Culver, but I think he's a little bit safer in the way that maybe Colin Sexton was at number 8 last year.
Does it come down to those, you think, Reddish, Culver, or Hunter at 5? And what do you make of Culver? That's a guy that really shot up in last season for Texas Tech. When they made that deep tournament run, he kind of grabbed everybody's attention.
So I think if Garland is there, Dave, I think the Cavs would absolutely consider that, despite the fact that they drafted Colin with the 8th overall pick last year. I think John Beilein, from everything that I've been told, believes strongly in a 2-point guard system, thinks it would be really, really difficult for teams to guard that in today's NBA. I think that was sort of proven during the NBA Finals. Fred VanVleet was playing off the ball, on the ball. He's not a shooting guard. He's more of a point guard. Kyle Lowry was playing alongside with him. So I just think that kind of system is very, very appealing to somebody like John Beilein, and the Cavs don't have nearly enough shooting on this roster. And Darius-Garland is considered maybe the best pure shooter in the draft. So if he's there at 5, Dave, I absolutely think he would get strong consideration. Beyond that, I think those are the names that come up. Jarrett-Culver is somebody that the Cavs have watched in person. He scored 22 points against John Beilein's Michigan team in the NCAA tournament. So John Beilein got a firsthand look at how good he is. He has rebuilt his jumper from his freshman year to his sophomore year. That's part of the reason why the Cavs believe his shooting percentages across the board dipped this past year. He's more of an offensive-minded guy than DeAndre-Hunter is. He was able to do things at Texas Tech that DeAndre-Hunter wasn't able to do at Virginia. So you got to see more of the game of Jarrett-Culver. But I think the same questions about DeAndre exist with Culver. Just how great is he going to be? Is he going to be a number 1, number 2, number 3 type option? It's so hard, I think, Dave, right now for the Cavs to put these guys in order. I think it's very, very difficult for NBA teams to put these guys in order. I think if you ask Dallas, they would have it one way. If you ask Atlanta, they would have it another way. If you ask the Cavs, they'd probably have it another way. It's just that kind of draft.
Chris, what about 26? You have them taking Darius Bazley. That's a guy from Princeton High School who didn't go to college, basically did an internship. Right. What do you like? What do you see with him? What do you think the Cavs see with him?
I just think he's more of the modern day big, Dave. And I think his versatility is very, very appealing. And I think his upside is also really appealing. This is somebody who can pass, dribble, and shoot. He can extend his game out to the perimeter. And I think with one of these 2 picks, I don't know which one, Dave, I think the Cavs are going to take that swing. Maybe it's at 5 with Cam Reddish, and they're going to bank on his upside. Or maybe it's at 26 with Bazley and try and bank on his upside. But his name, in conversations that I've had with a lot of people around the NBA and a lot of people inside the organization, his name continues to come up as somebody that the Cavs are intrigued by. They went out to Clutch Sports, his agency, watched his pro day. They're hoping to bring him in for a workout as well. So this is somebody that the Cavs have been monitoring. And I think based on where they are as an organization, and how far away they are from being that quote-unquote competitor in the Eastern Conference, I think they're the kind of team that makes sense for Bazley, where they can bring him along slowly. They don't have to rush him out in the court, and hopefully he becomes more 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and he outplays that draft slot of number 26.
Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter here on cleveland.com. We appreciate the time and the insight. We are all out of time on this edition of More Sports and Less Levine. We will see you again next week. Les will be back in Monday at 6 o'clock live for More Sports and Less Levine. Have a great weekend, everybody.